Welcome back to Global War 1939. We just finished off round one, so let's take a look at some of the action. For the Germans, they actually had a pretty good turn in acquiring the territory that they need on their opening round, meeting all their objectives fairly well to a certain degree. Unfortunately for the Germans, the French and the Polish put up a massive resistance, more so than average. They actually fought very well against the Germans. In fact, the Germans lost all their infantry. They're completely got their infantry corps pretty much wiped out. They only survived the opening round with only 4 were intact, 2 of which didn't even fight in any battles. The guy that's left behind in Western Germany, he started the game in Berlin, moved up in the non-combat phase, and just stayed there. So he didn't even fight. The other guy was just sent to annex Hungary and Romania. He didn't engage in any battles. Only the 2 survived. One in Yugoslavia and the other way up in Norway. So this guy fought in 2 battles. This guy only fought in 1. And the rest are completely wiped out. The French in Reims with that fort, giving their infantry an added boost, was not good. In fact, the casualties for the Germans were so bad, the French even started hitting into their armor, losing 1 light tank. So not a good showing in that regards. Everything else went extremely well, went as expected. Like I said, meeting all their objectives. So that was fantastic. We actually, talking over with Triple Crown, having a couple discussions before the game commenced. Before, in previous games, I was under the impression that the airborne were allowed to capture territory. Unfortunately, they are not. So that was a mistake on the previous game that I was explaining with Brodeur. So ignore that. Airborne infantry need to be accompanied by another land-based unit. So another armor, mech, whatever. So, but I still wanted the Brodeur to get that third $5 bonus. So they'll collect $15 in bonuses at the end of round 1. 1 for the iron ore and not being at war with the Soviets. So now, in the rules, in the non-combat phase, once all combat's conducted, you're allowed to move your units into friendly territories. Now, once Paris fell, we rolled for territories and the Navy for the remaining of the French. And very luckily, Brodeur and Marseille both sided with Vichy France, meaning they're now friendly to the Germans. So we purposely left a unit behind in Reims and swung around in Normandy, and were able to place a unit in Brodeur, meaning we're able to collect that $5 bonus. And in discovering this, we actually discovered a way to activate all 3 German allies. Basically, after the first impulse on your non-combat phase, make sure you have a mech in Austria. Now, what that means is that you'll have 1 less mech in Western Poland. So instead of going with 4, you'll be going in with 3. Not a big deal. You still take that quite easily. So we started the second impulse with the mech here in Austria. Still conducted our battle in Yugoslavia, purposely leaving the mech behind. Don't engage. You can't bring that mech into that battle. It needs to stay behind. And then on the second impulse, second non-combat phase, run through Yugoslavia into your third minor ally, activating them. Previous games we weren't activating that until turn 2, but now we're able to activate it right away, which is great because that gives you an extra $2, gives you that Bulgarian standing army 1 turn sooner, which will definitely need those infantry, especially after this showing, to face off against the Soviets. So that I was overall, I was pretty happy with the land acquisitions for the Germans. Not so much against the Polish and the French resistance. They certainly put up a fight, so kudos to them. So after Paris, the other landings or the other territories that the Germans picked up these two territories. The rest of the French territories all went for the UK. So they picked all these up, which is they're not worth anything. The ones that are worth the money are these two and Syria over here. The two territories, French territories in the Pacific, both went Axis as well. So those rolls, now they're all 50-50. So they could go Axis or they could go Free French, which are aligned with the Allies. So the four that we worry about the most, Marseille, Brodeur, and the two over in the Pacific, all went Axis. The rest of them, the Axis really don't care about. If you pick them up, great. If not, not a big deal. I say the only other one that you're worried about would be this one here, just because of that naval base. But other than that, it's not a big deal if it goes Allies. You can always capture it pretty easily. It's only one infantry or two infantry there. But they are more advanced infantry. The French in Africa do defend at a 5, being the French Foreign Legion units. For the Navy, the Germans did pretty decent. They end up picking up the lone battleship. Not a coastal battleship, the actual battleship. So they have two of these now on the map. And they also rolled and got 2 destroyers. Not bad of a pickup. The Free French that went or that aligned with the Allies. The UK ended up getting 2 coastal battleships from Norway and a destroyer from the French. That's not too bad. And Vichy France got the 2 cruisers and 2 destroyers. The rest were sunk, of course. So, all in all, Germany, not too bad, except for their infantry corps. So, all that means is that turn 2, turn 3 are going to be heavily invested in reacquiring those, because they'll need about 20 before they move into Russia, and minimum 20. Of course, if you can get more, great. Minimum 20. For the Japanese, again, they did their J1 attack, and again, very happy how this actually turned out. The Japanese did extremely well in acquiring their objectives. They activated their ally, took out these 2 territories, which are just walk-ons, but it is $5 that you need and want. They took out both victory cities off the FEC. Of course, this is the J1. Unfortunately, because you are attacking unprovokedly, it does give an economic boost to the Americans. So that's unfortunate, but these objectives should be done by the Japanese, in my opinion. Now, for their losses, they only lost 1 infantry in this entire sequence. So complete contrast to the Germans, where they're losing units left, right. The Japanese did extremely well. However, most of these battles are a lot easier than what the Germans are looking at for resistance. As in, Hong Kong only has 1 infantry. Singapore has 3. It does have a fort, which does give added bonuses. However, the Japanese did go ahead and use their sneak attack ability against the FEC as opposed to the Americans. We'll see if that was a mistake. But it does give a massive economic boost to the Japanese, essentially doubling their starting income. But because we did the sneak attack, the fort here is rendered useless. And that means they can take this objective with a lot less firepower than normally required. And infantry loss was in Singapore. This did go to 2 rounds of combat. Three rounds of combat, sorry. So, and all their bombardments that they used, they missed on all their bombardments. Unfortunate. And the Navy that the Dutch start with in 88, that was sunk, and because this was one of the sneak attacks, they were able to, the Japanese fleet were able to move again, so they opted to come down to 76, kind of putting up a blocker from the Anzac fleet that starts in 89. Not quite a blocker because they could just go around here if the Japanese didn't defend that transport, which they did with 2 subs, 2 cruisers. So 2 vessels versus 4, probably not a good idea. So the Anzacs just decided to regroup in 97, reinforcing this island of Guam, not Guam, Dutch New Guinea, sorry. Deploying troops up in that island for defense. And of course, they already had the French territories. So because these both went pro Axis, they decided to attack that lone Chinese territory on the coast. Because Japanese is an island nation, they want access to all the coastal territories. They decided to go in there. Now, it does start, this Chinese territory does start with 4 infantry. So that is quite a blow from the Chinese capabilities of attacking. And then up in northern China, Japanese held territory, they just reinforced, remaneuvered, kind of backed out a little bit. The veterans that start here backed out to defend that complex that we built, and reinforced mostly from the Japanese home island, get some more infantry for future attacks. And then all their veteran fighters ended up in this territory again, building a complex for their opening round purchase. And most of their fleet is now in southern Asia. Usually the go-to, because of all the territories that you are attacking, is easier, or naturally your navy ends up in this area of the map. And we're able to accomplish all this because just the way the starting transport for the Japanese are situated, you start with 6, so 4 of them can actually move up to 3 spaces. The only 2 that can't are the ones that start in 91, so it's highly suggestive. Grab the infantry here and here on these islands that you start with, and bring them back to attack Hong Kong. So these transports can just go 1, 2, offload, good to go. The transports that start here and here have the ability to move up to 3, so they're the ones that are tasked with taking this island, taking the Singapore. And then for their purchases, they purchased the 2 complexes in mainland China, so now they can deploy troops right there. They don't have to rely on to getting them in their home island and then having to transport them over. So it makes it a lot easier to conquer China with those complexes. And then for their bonus income, they went ahead, got a transport, battleship, and airborne. And from their original money, they just got 2 infantry and then 2 special naval landing force as well. So that's not too bad. They do have, so their plan with this transport and their 2 transport planes, they're going to pick up most of these guys out in out in the islands. These islands here, these infantry will actually serve the Japanese Empire better in China, so they're going to pick them up, redeploy them, leaving these islands vacant, yes. So for the Americans or whoever else, they'll just be walk-ons. But in my opinion, if the Americans are landing in these islands here, it means your navy is destroyed. So losing these islands will, where you're worried about not having a navy, you're probably got bigger things to worry about than the Americans landing here and here. So if meaning that if you have a big enough navy, you don't have to keep units in all these islands because your navy will protect it for you. So that's the thinking there. So the next couple turns, they'll grab all these guys, redeploy them, and over the next 2 turns, the Japanese, their task is to take the rest of the Money Islands. They are lightly defended. Well, two infantry. So that's decent enough. They'll have to bring a significant force to take that. Their next objective in the future will be taking this territory here and kind of holding FEC back. They'll probably, once they get this, what they would like to see is some kind of stalemate where FEC can't reinforce China. And the only way to do so would be to go around, the long way around, which takes 2, 3, 4 turns to get new units into China to help them out. So, and of course, by taking the Burma Road, it stifles the Chinese production by removing the $5 bonus, prevents the Americans from lend-leasing light armor, and it also prevents the Chinese from acquiring artillery, essentially turning the Chinese into a defensive army as opposed to an offensive. All right, so for the Chinese forces themselves, they went ahead and captured this vacant territory. This is a pretty standard move, so offsetting the dollar loss from the Japanese here. And then Communist China, they also took out that vacant territory. So the Japanese will have to recapture those at some point if they can. For FEC, considering FEC here didn't really do a lot. They redeployed their forces, reinforcing this territory, and they acquired infantry on their purchase. The British in Africa, and combined with the FEC fleet, were able to take out southern Iran. They did attack Iraq. It doesn't really feel in the nature of them because they're supposed to be defending territories against the Axis. However, they calculated that the Iraqis wanted to join the Axis, so they saw them as an enemy and decided to attack. Now, this, in my opinion, this is a big deal. Do this attack, take Iraq out, because it is tied to an objective. Or if you wait, after turn 7, Iraq does flip to a pro-allied. Now, why wait until turn 7 to collect this income when you can do it on turn 2? Take this out, activate this, and then on the next turn you build to activate these 2 territories, locking in a $5 bonus for your side. Not only that, it also gives the Soviets a $5 bonus as well. So that's a huge economic boost, especially when they're trying to fight off the Germans. So this is a $10 swing for the Allies. So do this. And then for the UK purchase, they went ahead and got their complex and various other units. Like they got FEC, they bought FEC a light armor. They went ahead and got themselves an artillery piece from their home island and a couple of destroyers. They deployed one in South Africa and another one up in Canada for the future Atlantic battle. So we'll see how all that plays out. For the Italians, they pretty much, what the Italians did, they captured this Alexandria territory. This will prevent the British from their $3 bonus from holding all their original territory. So you just need to take out one to do that. Down in these two territories, the starting infantry here. They just moved to Italian Somaliland. This territory is War II. This will fall. There's very little you can do to save these units, prevent these territories from falling. You just got to hold out as long as you can. So I suspect by turn 3, this will be under UK control. So to offset the income from losing this $3, you should really take Alexandria, Lower Egypt, so your income doesn't change. All right, so for the Australians, they didn't do much. They purchased another transport infantry, redeployed up their navy in 97, got some more troops up in New Guinea with their fighter. So their home territory is pretty vacant. They only got 3 infantry, 1 in New Zealand. However, the Japanese are in no situation to make an attack against the Anzacs, so they're pretty safe there. And of course, over time, they'll accumulate more material, more infantry. So they're not too worried at this point in the game. And even if the Japanese did want to make an attack here, the only spot they can actually reach is this territory. And as soon as they land 2 infantry here, they're going to respond. They have plenty of time. That would be wouldn't be a good idea for the Japanese at this point. Maybe later on. We'll see. For the Americans in the Pacific, they just redeployed their units or their navy, pretty much circling Hawaii. They took out their 2 starting transport. They're going to pick up these infantry as they'll be better suited to defend the Victory City. These territories are not actually worth anything. However, they are good staging grounds for future attacks for aircraft. So the Japanese might want to think about taking 1 or 2 of these out, especially Wake, just to solidify their dominance in the Pacific. But for right now, they're going to use these infantry to defend that Victory City. They went ahead and purchased a cruiser, another infantry, and they bought the Chinese light armor. So their starting income is quite low comparative to what they get later on in the game. And over here in the Atlantic, the Americans, they didn't actually acquire any new units. All the new units went in the Pacific, but they went ahead, redeployed. They're ready to activate Mexico once that becomes available. And they got some troops and they brought it down to the Caribbean, and they'll use these to activate Brazil later on in the game. And their starting navy, they just brought down to Sea Zone 49 to kind of protect it. The Canadian transport that starts next to British Columbia is on its way to the Atlantic. Now, one little tip for the Japanese: the 2 subs that you start in Sea Zone 125, 124, bring them to 125. Keep them both there, because if not, what will end up happening, as we've seen with Triple Crown's game, is that the transport and the Canadian infantry that's in British Columbia can make it to Sea Zone 125, land a guy off, and become a huge annoyance to the Japanese. It's not going to break the game or anything of that nature, but by having the 2 transports or the 2 subs in 125, it prevents that, and save yourself a huge headache. Not a huge headache, but just an annoyance, and they prevents the Canadians from picking up an extra free $2. So that transport is on its way to the Atlantic, where it should be, to help the UK in Europe. For UK proper in Europe, they didn't actually do much at all. The fleet that they picked up, the 2 coastal battleships in 24. So on the German turn, all their subs that were in the Atlantic came up and attacked the Canadian fleet in 21. Completely seeking that. They didn't lose any subs at all. And then they, on the second impulse, they attacked the fleet in 23. Combined with some air power, their medium bombers came to assist, sinking that. And they were left with 3 subs remaining after that battle. So they took a few losses. And then the fleet that the UK picked up after the rolls from Paris falling came and uh, attacked the German subs, sinking them, and the UK didn't lose anything in that little skirmish. And the small fleet that they have here, and they also picked up a transport. I forgot, sorry. They picked up a transport from the French, so they are going to use that. They brought down some reinforcements into Africa, and the fleet here just went here to defend that transport. They're bringing down a fighter. So this territory here is actually part of Portugal, but in the rules, the Allies are allowed to use it as a staging ground. So they're allowed to land aircraft there. So that swordfish is actually going to end up in Gibraltar for defense. It's not a full-on fighter. It doesn't have a defense like an extremely good defense value like the other fighters, but it is an extra unit to help defend Gibraltar, because the British are aware that the Italians will want to take that territory at some point in the future. So these two infantry can come up and help defend as well, or help defend the French. We'll see how that goes. The small fleet, you start with a couple vessels down in this area. The Grass Bay that starts off the coast of Brazil came down and took out the transports that starts here. They were thinking about going after the one transport and the two destroyers, but two dice at 4 versus 1 at 6. They decided to go with the guaranteed kill, take out that transport. The 2 destroyers came down, sunk that, losing 1 destroyer in the process. And then the transport was able to go ahead and activate this pro-allied territory. So this transport, these two infantry, they'll probably redeploy either in Gibraltar or in Morocco to help defend the Allied territories there against the Italians. And then for the Russians did a few things. All their territories that all the units that they start here, they're moving them west to help defend against the Germans, because they picked up their some kind of transmission that the Germans were eventually might be thinking about attacking. So we'll see. But they're redeploying their assets to help defend their cities. And they went ahead and came into East Poland, taking a few losses there, surviving with 2 light tanks. This battle up in the Baltics went extremely well for the Russians, and they didn't lose anything. Their $15 that they start with, they decided to go with 5 infantry and deploying those up in the north to eventually go after the Finns. So one side rule that Russia is allowed to attack Finland without going to war with the Germans. So that's probably a good possibility that if the Russians can take out those 3 Finnish territories, it is another NO bonus for Russia. It gives them a little more money. It does remove quite a few infantry away from the Germans. It's pretty much that's all that's up there outside of a fighter and artillery. And it prevents the Germans from having a northern assault. So basically limiting the Germans from having to only being able to attack from the south, maybe a small attack from the center. But this would eliminate a full northern attack if the Russians can pull that off. And this battle up here, I'll do this most games, and it's usually it's worked out so far about 50-50. Some games they completely wipe out the Finnish, and then others the Finnish are able to resist and hold off. And this also depends on how Germany reinforces it, utilizing their transports. Now, of course, with the colonial factory here, that does change this a little bit, because now the Germans can deploy armor or other heavier weapons to help defend against the Soviets. So we'll see how all that plays out. All right, I'm pretty sure that is it. And for the Italians, what their purchase, the Italians went ahead and purchased their own medium factory in response of the British medium factory. They also went ahead and got a military base. So now the Italians are able to deploy up to 4 units in this region of the map. They might think about getting a second military base here. Then they can get up to 5. And then what's ever left over will obviously have to go in their home country. But they also purchased another transport, so now they're up to 3. Ideally, you want the Italians to have 5 transports and have enough material up in this area to load up 5 transports worth of artillery, infantry, tanks, whatever, to be able to hit Cairo at a moment's notice. Combine that with whatever assets that they have in northern Africa as well. So we'll see how all that plays out. But ideally, they would want 2 more. So over the next couple turns, you're going to want to be purchased at least 1 transport a turn until you're up to 5, and reevaluate from there. For the economics of the game, pretty much most countries were able to get quite a few bonuses, actually. So the Russians ended up getting 1 of their bonus from the Baltic states. The Japanese got 1 $5 bonus from taking Singapore. The Germans, of course, had their 3 bonuses. The Italians got a bonus from the Mediterranean. The Americans are up to quite a few dollars. They are at 4, let's see, 30. Yeah, they're at 44. That is mostly due to die rolls. They did pretty decent on the die roll. They got a 14. And the rest of the income is from, they get an economic bonus from Germany attacking France, and then the Japanese attacking FEC. They got a bonus there. And the UK Commonwealth were able to have 8 transports on the map at the end of their turn. So the entirety of the Commonwealth countries, all 5 of them, got their bonuses. So UK gets $5. South Africa gets 1. Canada gets 2. India gets 2, I believe. And Australia got both of their bonuses combined for 5. So that's a lot of extra money on the map, just by acquiring the 1 or 2 extra transports. Canada built 1, Australia built 1, just to get them up to the 8 mark. So we'll see how the rest plays out. I would suspect on round 2, the Axis are going to want to target those as best they can, or as whenever they can. But if you're only sinking 1 or 2, it's very easy for UK to rebuild those. So that'll probably be a bonus that they keep, or they keep an eye on for the remainder of the game, because all 5 of those countries will get a bonus. So you don't want to leave that off. And China even got their $5 bonus for the Burma Road being open. So China's actually up to $19. They went ahead and purchased artillery and 2 infantry, saving $2. So that's how they're up to that much income. So the only country that actually didn't get a bonus was the Communist Chinese, which they will, or potentially, if Russia goes to war with the Japanese. All right. Well, thank you for watching, and you have yourself a great day.